My name is Eliza Monroe. I turned 30 today. There should have been cake, maybe some off key singing, perhaps even a cheap bottle of sparkling wine. Instead, there was the familiar weight of unspoken resentment, settling over a dinner table laden with my parents' anxieties and the scent of overcooked pot roast. And soon, there would be the slamming of a door. Mine, as I was unceremoniously evicted from the house I financially kept afloat on my 30th birthday. Happy birthday to me. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Growing up in our small house on the edge of Albany, I'd always been the responsible one. While my younger brother Liam, quiet and artistic, drifted through his own world of music and sketches, I was the one focused on grades, part time jobs, escaping our town's limited horizons. My parents, Richard and Patricia Monroe, encouraged this in their way. Dad, laid off from his factory supervisor job 3 years ago after decades of service, retreated into bitterness and daytime television. Mom, juggling part time hours at a local bakery, seemed perpetually overwhelmed, sighing heavily over bills she couldn't quite cover. They saw my drive, my steady job as a medical billing specialist, not as something to be proud of, but as a resource, a safety net. Their safety net. The real shift happened 5 years ago when my maternal grandmother's dementia progressed to the point where she could no longer live alone. Moving her into a facility was financially unthinkable for my parents. The only solution, presented to me as a foregone conclusion, was for Grandma to move into my old childhood bedroom, and for me, naturally, to cover the significantly increased costs associated with her care. It's family, Eliza, Mom had said, tears in her eyes. We have to take care of our own. And you're doing so well now, that job of yours. It's a blessing you can help, so I helped. What choice did I have? I loved my grandmother, a kind, gentle woman who now often drifted in a fog of confusion. I couldn't bear the thought of her in a substandard state facility. So my dreams of finally getting my own apartment, of saving for further certifications in medical coding, were put on indefinite hold. My paycheck, already stretched thin covering their basic utilities after Dad's layoff, was now further depleted by the costs of a part time home health aide, expensive nutritional supplements, incontinence supplies, medications not fully covered by Medicare. I became the primary funder, the de facto care coordinator, the buffer between my parents' financial instability and my grandmother's complex needs. The burden wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Living back in my childhood home at nearly 30 felt like a regression. My parents' gratitude, initially present, quickly curdled into expectation. My contributions became invisible, simply part of the household budget they no longer worried about managing. Dad spent his days critiquing my work ethic. Still staring at that computer, Eliza? Doesn't look like real work. While complaining about job prospects he never actually pursued. Mom sighed about the rising cost of groceries I bought, while occasionally treating herself to new shoes or salon visits. Liam, bless his 17-year-old heart, did his best, spending hours sitting with Grandma, playing music for her, helping with basic tasks when the aide wasn't there, shouldering the hands-on care his parents often conveniently overlooked. But he was still a kid, focused on school and his own quiet artistic pursuits. Lately, though, a different kind of unease had been growing. I handle medical billing for a living. I know how to read invoices, track expenses, spot discrepancies, and I started noticing them. The hours billed by the home care agency seemed slightly inflated some weeks. Requests from Mom for Grandma's special dietary supplements seemed more frequent than the supply should necessitate. Small things, easily explained away perhaps, but my professional instincts hummed with suspicion. Was all the money I allocated specifically for Grandma's care actually reaching her? Or was it being siphoned off from my parents' own expenses, subsidizing their lives beyond just the basic utilities I already covered? The thought made me feel sick, but I couldn't ignore it. Which led me to tonight, my 30th birthday. I'd come home from work, exhausted as usual, carrying a small cupcake I'd bought myself from a bakery near the office. No balloons, no banner, just the smell of pot roast and the usual tense silence around the dinner table. Liam offered a quiet, happy birthday, Eliza. Mom mumbled something similar without looking up. Dad grunted from the head of the table. Maybe it was turning 30. Maybe it was the accumulated exhaustion. Maybe it was the single flickering candle on my sad little cupcake. But I decided, very gently, very carefully, to finally voice my concerns. Mom, Dad, I began after a few bites of dry pot roast. I was reviewing the home care agency invoices this week and reconciling them with the funds I transferred for Grandma's supplies, and things aren't quite lining up perfectly. I was just wondering if maybe we could sit down together sometime soon, look over the budget for Grandma's care specifically, make sure everything designated for her is being allocated as effectively as possible. I kept my tone light, helpful, framing it as a practical budgeting issue. The reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. Dad slammed his fork down, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He snarled, leaning across the table. Are you accusing us? Accusing your mother of mismanaging money? No, of course not, I said quickly, taken aback by the intensity of his reaction. I just meant maybe we could track things more clearly. We know how to care for her. Mom jumped in, her voice high and defensive. We do everything. And this is the thanks we get? You questioning us? Accusing us? I wasn't accusing, I insisted, trying to backtrack, but the damage was done. My quiet question had clearly hit a raw nerve. Ungrateful. Dad spat, his voice rising. Living here practically rent-free, judging us. If you think you know better, if you think you can just waltz in here and question how we run things after everything we sacrifice. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Then maybe you shouldn't be living here at all. You think you're so independent? Fine, be independent. Get out. Get out of my house. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Get out. On my 30th birthday. Because I asked a question about the funds I provided for my grandmother's care. Mom gasped but said nothing to contradict him, her silence a tacit agreement. Liam stared at Dad, horrified, then looked at me, his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. I looked from my father's furious face to my mother's averted gaze. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. Not in a loud, shattering way, but in a quiet, decisive severing. The years of obligation, the guilt, the desperate hope for approval, it all just detached. Okay, Dad, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, steady. If that's what you want. I stood up from the table, leaving my half-eaten birthday cupcake behind. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply turned and walked towards the stairs. Their shock at my quiet compliance was almost palpable. They expected tears, pleading, drama. They didn't expect acceptance. Upstairs in the room that had been mine since childhood but never truly felt like it, I pulled out my old suitcase. I packed methodically. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the few books that mattered. Liam appeared at the door a few minutes later, his face pale. Chloe Eliza, he whispered, using my first name. Don't go. Please, what about Grandma? Who's going to make sure she's okay? Mom and Dad? They forget things sometimes. They get busy. His fear wasn't for me or even for himself. It was for Grandma. That protective instinct, even at 17, shamed our parents. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled him into a quick hug. Listen to me, Liam, I said softly but urgently. I have to go, but this doesn't change anything about Grandma. I'll figure something out from the outside, I promise. You just keep an eye on her for me, okay? Let me know if things get really bad. And focus on your school, your music. You'll be 18 soon. We'll get you out too. He nodded numbly, his eyes swimming with tears he refused to shed. He hugged me back fiercely, then slipped away. Before I zipped the suitcase, I sat down at my small desk, opened my laptop, and logged into my online accounts. The home care agency portal, cancel recurring payment authorization effective immediately. Reason, unsafe environment concerns regarding fund allocation. Click. Electricity provider, remove autopay. Delete saved payment method. Click. Water, click. Gas, click. Internet/cable bundle, click. All linked to my bank account, all quietly severed. I couldn't directly stop the mortgage payment I wasn't legally obligated on, but their ability to pay it relied heavily on me covering everything else. That support structure was now gone. Suitcase in hand, I walked quietly down the stairs. The living room TV was on, casting flickering blue light into the hallway. I could hear the low murmur of voices. They hadn't even come to check on me. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cold November night. The wind whipped around me, biting, but this time it felt different. Not like an assault, but like a bracing slap of reality. I loaded my suitcase, got into my car, and drove away without looking back, leaving behind the house, the history, the hurt. Heading towards Grace's apartment, towards an uncertain future, but one that would finally be entirely my own. The safety net was gone. For all of us. Grace opened her apartment door late on my birthday night, her expression shifting from sleepy confusion to immediate concern. I probably looked like a refugee. Pale, eyes shadowed, clutching a single suitcase and my work laptop bag. Eliza? Oh my God, come in, come in. I mumbled a garbled explanation. Fight with parents. Kicked out. Needed a place. Grace, bless her empathetic soul, didn't press for details. She just steered me towards her comfortable, slightly worn sofa, made tea, and offered a listening ear without judgment. Curling up under a blanket she provided, the chaotic energy of my parents' house finally receding, I felt a sliver of safety. But it was overshadowed by a gnawing anxiety, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. Not for myself, but for my frail grandmother left behind, and for Liam, trapped in the middle. The fallout began less than 24 hours later. As predicted, the utility companies, no longer receiving automatic payments from my account, began the shut-off process. Almost simultaneously, the home care agency, having received my formal notification about suspending funding due to safety and financial concerns, informed my parents that the scheduled nurse visits were canceled effective immediately. The desperate texts from Liam started mid-morning. Liam, Eliza, heat's off. It's really cold. Grandma keeps asking for her blanket. Liam, nurse didn't show up. Mom's freaking out, blaming you. Liam, Grandma missed her morning meds. Dad just yelled at her to stop coughing. He won't check her blood sugar. Liam, they just left, said they had important errands. Grandma's alone. I skipped school, but I don't know what to do if she needs something. Each message was a small knife twisting in my gut. This was exactly what I feared. My parents, stripped of the financial cushion I provided, weren't stepping up to care for Grandma. They were neglecting her, blaming me for the consequences of their own actions. My cutting off the funds wasn't just impacting their comfort. It was directly endangering my grandmother's well-being. Then came the phone calls. First, Mom, her voice trembling not with concern for her mother, but with self-pity and rage directed at me. Eliza, you have to turn the heat back on. Your grandmother will get sick. And the nurse? You canceled the nurse? How could you be so cruel? This is your family. Mom, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, pacing Grace's small living room. I stopped paying because Dad kicked me out and because I had serious concerns the funds I provided for Grandma's care weren't being used properly. You and Dad are there. You need to ensure she gets her medication. You need to figure out how to pay the bills for the house you live in, and you chose to have her live in. But we can't, she wailed. Your father isn't working. You know that. You're trying to kill your own grandmother. No, Mom, I said, my voice hardening. I'm trying to ensure she isn't neglected or financially exploited. When you can guarantee her care and provide transparency about the funds, we can talk. Until then, this is your responsibility. I hung up before she could argue further. Dad's call was pure, unfiltered rage. You listen here, you ungrateful brat. You turn that heat back on, and you reinstate that nurse now, or you'll be sorry. You think you can just walk away and destroy this family? You destroyed it when you kicked me out for asking a simple question about finances, Dad, I replied coldly. Goodbye. I blocked both their numbers, my hands shaking. The relative quiet lasted less than a day. Liam texted again, his words making my blood run cold. Liam, Eliza? Dad furious. Found Mom's old password list again. He's trying to get into your bank credit card accounts online now. Says he needs to access emergency funds for Grandma. Panic surged, sharp and metallic. I immediately scrambled for my laptop, logging into every financial account I possessed. Multiple failed login attempts from their home IP address confirmed Liam's warning. Thankfully, the complex passwords and two-factor authentication I'd set up years ago held firm. I changed everything again anyway, adding biometric security where possible. The audacity, trying to hack my accounts while simultaneously accusing me of abandoning them. Just when I thought things couldn't escalate further, they did. 3 days after the failed hacking attempt, late on a Friday evening, there was violent pounding on Grace's apartment door. Not knocking, hammering, like someone trying to break it down. Eliza Monroe, I know you're in there. It was Dad's voice, rough with anger and maybe alcohol. Open this door. We need to talk. You can't hide from your responsibilities. Grace rushed out of her bedroom, eyes wide with fear. Is that? I nodded grimly, already dialing 911. My father, I whispered into the phone, relaying the address, explaining the prior harassment warning he'd received, his current aggressive behavior. He's trying to force his way in. We feel unsafe. The pounding continued, interspersed with shouts. You owe us. You owe your grandmother. Stop being selfish. Grace stood trembling near the door, clutching a heavy umbrella like a weapon. We waited, heartbeats thudding against our ribs, until finally, the blessed sound of approaching sirens pierced the night. We heard the police confronting my father in the hallway, his initial bluster dissolving into muttered complaints as they sternly warned him about harassment, trespassing, and the consequences of violating the previous warning. They escorted him away again, this time perhaps with a citation or a night in the drunk tank. I didn't know for sure. After the police assured us it was safe and left, Grace turned to me, her face etched with worry. Eliza, she said gently but firmly, you know you can't stay here now, right? He knows where you are. He's escalating. It's not safe. She was right. Tears of frustration and exhaustion pricked my eyes. Kicked out of my parents' house, now essentially forced out of my temporary refuge. Where could I go? I felt adrift, targeted, utterly alone except for Grace's kindness and Liam's desperate texts. I spent the next day making hushed phone calls, finally arranging to sublet a room temporarily from another acquaintance who lived further across town, someone my parents wouldn't know. Packing my few belongings again felt like a depressing ritual. As I was taping up the last box, my phone buzzed with another text from Liam. My stomach clenched before I even read it. Liam, Eliza, worse, found paperwork Dad left out. Looks like draft for emergency medical power of attorney for Grandma. Saying she's incapacitated and he needs control of her medical decisions and finances, her small pension. He's trying to take control. BC Nurse money stopped. What do we do? I stared at the message, the words blurring. Power of attorney, control of her pension. This wasn't just about getting back at me anymore. This wasn't just neglect born of incompetence or resentment. This felt calculated, predatory. They were trying to legally seize control of my vulnerable grandmother, likely to access her meager funds now that mine were cut off. The immediate danger wasn't just to Grandma's physical health anymore. It was to her autonomy, her financial security, everything. The game had changed. This wasn't just about my escape anymore. I had to intervene. I had to protect her. Liam's text about the power of attorney paperwork landed like a physical blow. Saying she's incapacitated and he needs control of her medical decisions and finances, her small pension. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about punishing me anymore. This wasn't just neglect born from their own inadequacy. This was calculated, predatory. They were actively trying to seize legal control over my vulnerable, ailing grandmother to access her meager pension now that my own financial well had run dry. The last shred of hope that maybe, somehow, this was all a terrible misunderstanding evaporated. They knew exactly what they were doing. My focus shifted instantly. This wasn't just about my survival anymore. It was about protecting Grandma. I spent the next hour on frantic, focused phone calls. Not to my parents, not even to my usual friends. I called the county's Adult Protective Services hotline, reporting suspected elder neglect and potential financial exploitation, referencing the canceled home care and Liam's testimony about missed medications and unsupervised periods. Then I contacted the local legal aid society, specifically asking for their elder law division. I explained the situation again, this time emphasizing the imminent threat of my father attempting to gain power of attorney over my grandmother, who, due to her dementia, was clearly unable to provide informed consent. I forwarded the documentation I had, copies of the home care invoices I'd paid, Liam's panicked texts detailing the neglect and the POA paperwork he'd seen, my own brief affidavit about the circumstances leading to my departure and suspension of care funding. The response from both APS and legal aid was swift and serious. An APS caseworker initiated an immediate wellness check at the house. A sharp, compassionate legal aid attorney specializing in elder financial abuse took my case pro bono, immediately filing an emergency motion with the probate court to block any attempt by my parents to secure power of attorney, citing conflict of interest and evidence of potential neglect and financial motivation. Simultaneously, remembering Grandma Eleanor's advice about community pressure, I contacted an old college acquaintance, Alex, my friend from the previous story plan, reused here, now working as an investigative reporter for a regional news website known for covering social justice issues. I shared the anonymized story, focusing on the plight of an elderly woman caught between struggling family caregivers and the potential for financial exploitation when external support is withdrawn. I provided background documentation emphasizing the systemic issues, not just my personal drama. Alex was cautious but intrigued, promising to look into the broader issue of elder care funding gaps and family conflicts in the region. The following days were a tense blur. APS conducted their investigation. My parents were apparently furious, trying to obstruct the caseworker, claiming I was orchestrating a vindictive campaign. But Liam, interviewed separately, bravely confirmed the details of Grandma's missed medications, the periods she was left alone, and the POA paperwork he'd seen. The legal aid attorney successfully obtained a temporary court order preventing my parents from making any changes to Grandma's financial or medical directives pending a full hearing. The article Alex wrote appeared online a week later. It didn't name names, but the details were specific enough that anyone familiar with our town's small social circles could connect the dots. It spoke of the immense pressure on families caring for elders, but also highlighted the risks of financial exploitation and neglect when support systems fail or are deliberately withdrawn due to internal conflict. The community reaction was quiet but palpable. Concerned calls to local elder care resources increased, and people started looking at my parents differently, the whispers shifting from judgment of me to concern for Grandma. Faced with the APS investigation, the legal block on the POA, and mounting community pressure, my parents' aggressive stance crumbled. The full extent of their financial mismanagement, including the misuse of funds meant for Grandma's care before I left, likely came to light during the APS and legal aid investigation. While criminal charges weren't immediately pressed, often difficult in complex family financial cases, without irrefutable embezzlement proof beyond reasonable doubt, the threat remained. More importantly, their attempt to control Grandma's assets was definitively thwarted. The most crucial outcome was ensuring Grandma's safety and proper care. Working with legal aid and APS and using Grandma's own, now protected pension funds, supplemented by Social Security, we arranged for her placement in a highly rated local assisted living facility specializing in memory care. It was heartbreaking to move her from the familiar surroundings of the house, but seeing the professional, compassionate care she received there, the relief on her face during moments of lucidity, confirmed it was the necessary, ethical choice. My parents, stripped of their caregiving role and the associated financial control, were granted limited, supervised visitation. With Grandma safe, my focus shifted to Liam. He turned 18 the following spring, graduating high school despite the turmoil at home. True to my promise, I helped him navigate the transition. We found a shared apartment for him and a friend near the community college where he enrolled in art classes. I helped him with the deposit, gave him a small monthly stipend I could actually afford for books and supplies, and offered constant encouragement. Seeing him finally breathe free, pursuing his passion, felt like the first real victory in this whole ordeal. Our bond, forged in shared adversity, became stronger than ever. My own life began to find a new equilibrium. I found a small, sunny apartment of my own. I excelled at my medical billing job, leveraging my meticulous nature, and even received a promotion. But the experience had changed me. The helplessness I felt witnessing my grandmother's vulnerability, the realization of how easily seniors could be financially exploited even by their own families, ignited a new sense of purpose. I started volunteering with the elder care advocacy group that legal aid had connected me with. My background in navigating complex billing and my organizational skills proved surprisingly useful. I helped families decipher confusing medical statements, connected them with financial assistance programs, identified potential red flags for financial abuse. It felt right, meaningful. Eventually, I took it a step further. Collaborating with Maria Garcia, my friend from Story Number 17's plan reused here as a fellow advocate, we launched a small local resource website, the Elders Ledger. It offered clear guides on navigating elder care costs, understanding POA and guardianship laws, identifying signs of financial abuse, and connecting families with reputable legal aid and social services in upstate New York. It didn't make money, but it filled a crucial gap. Pouring my energy into building this resource, into helping others avoid the pitfalls my own family fell into, felt like the most constructive way to process my own trauma. My parents, we remain estranged. The court case regarding the conservatorship attempt was dismissed once the POA block and APS investigation took hold. They lost the house eventually, unable to maintain it without my support or access to grandma's funds. Last I heard, they were living separately in low rent apartments. Their relationship fractured, their standing in the community diminished. I feel a distant pity, but no obligation. Sometimes late at night, after updating the Elders Ledger website or talking Liam through a college assignment, I think about that 30th birthday dinner, the eviction, the anger, the fear. It feels like another lifetime. The scars are there, yes, but they are woven now into a different narrative, one not of victimhood, but of advocacy, of protecting the vulnerable, of finding strength not despite the fracture, but because of it. The silence from my parents is no longer an ache. It's the quiet space where I finally built a life and a purpose truly my own.